The fire had already eaten through the roof by the time the first sheriff's deputy reached the Freeman property. Flames pushed through the rafters in long, rolling waves, lighting the dark Oklahoma sky above the small mobile home outside Welch. The cold December air carried the smell of burning wood and plastic, and the deputy moved fast across the yard, unsure whether anyone had made it out. It was the early morning hours of December 30th, 1999, a time when most families were asleep or getting ready for the new year. But inside this remote corner of Craig County, something violent had already unfolded. When firefighters knocked down enough of the flames to enter, they expected to find the bodies of the two teenage girls known to stay at the home that night, 16-year-old Lauria Bible and her best friend Ashley Freeman. Lauria had come over to celebrate Ashley's birthday. Instead, the first body discovered belonged to Ashley's mother, Kathy, found near the doorway with evidence suggesting she had been shot before the fire began. The location and condition of her body told investigators that the blaze was no accident. Someone had killed her and set the home on fire. As daylight broke over the ruins, the Freeman family gathered at the scene, numb and waiting for answers. Ashley's father, Danny, was nowhere to be found, and early suspicion fell on him. Investigators believed he might have killed Kathy before fleeing with the girls. For several hours, the working theory centered on that possibility, and the search for Danny stretched across the nearby roads and fields. But Lauria's family didn't believe it. They knew their daughter, and they knew she would have found a way to contact them if she could. Her car still sat in the driveway, untouched, with her purse and ID inside. Nothing suggested she had left willingly. Late in the afternoon, after the fire cooled enough for a deeper search, a second body was discovered under debris, Danny Freeman. He had also been shot. The revelation overturned the original assumptions and shifted the case from domestic violence to double homicide. Whoever killed Danny and Kathy had also taken Lauria and Ashley, and the burned home became a starting point for one of the most haunting missing persons cases in Oklahoma history. Lauria's parents, Lorene and Jay, arrived at the scene early and refused to leave, staying close as investigators combed through what remained of the trailer. They knew Lauria had been inside the night before. She had called home to say she planned to sleep over after Ashley's birthday dinner. There had been nothing unusual in her voice, nothing to suggest she sensed danger. But sometime during the night, someone came onto the property, murdered Ashley's parents, and vanished with both girls before setting fire to the home. In the hours that followed, Craig County deputies, Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation agents, and volunteers moved across the rural terrain searching for any sign of the missing teenagers. Footprints, tire tracks, and discarded items were examined, but nothing linked directly to Lauria or Ashley appeared. The fact that the killer, or killers, took both girls suggested they had been alive when removed from the home. That detail drove the urgency of the search and kept the families from giving in to despair. By the next morning, Lauria's parents began a door-to-door effort that would continue for years. They met with neighbors, ranchers, truckers, store owners, and anyone who might have seen something on the night of the fire. They posted flyers across the state and into Kansas and Missouri. The two girls' faces became fixtures on bulletin boards, convenience store windows, and newspaper pages throughout the region. As investigators pieced together the Freemans' troubled history, old conflicts emerged. Danny Freeman had accused local law enforcement of mistreating his son, Shane, who had been killed in a confrontation with deputies the year before. Tensions between the family and authorities raised questions about potential motives. But no evidence pointed directly to anyone connected with the prior shooting, and investigators continued exploring every lead. Months passed with no sign of Lauria or Ashley. Tips came in, some too vague to pursue, others promising but ultimately empty. Sightings were reported across multiple states, each one examined until it collapsed under scrutiny. Lauria's parents kept their daughter's case alive, attending crime conferences, contacting investigators, and maintaining constant pressure on agencies involved. They refused to accept the idea that Lauria might never be found. In the years that followed, the case slowly shifted toward individuals connected to drug activity in the region. Rumors circulated about men who had bragged about being involved in the killings and the disappearance of the girls. The names of suspected criminals surfaced repeatedly, and some of those men were later convicted of violent offenses unrelated to the Freeman case. But physical evidence linking any suspect to Lauria or Ashley remained absent. Then, more than a decade after the fire, a break surfaced in the form of long-buried testimony. A woman came forward claiming she had overheard detailed accounts of the crime from men she knew, men with violent histories and deep ties to the drug trade. According to her, the girls had been abducted, held captive, and later killed. She named individuals who had long been rumored within the investigation. The information led to renewed searches at remote properties once owned or used by those suspects. Excavations were conducted, wells were drained, and cadaver dogs were brought in. Over and over, investigators and volunteers dug through soil and debris in the hope of recovering remains. But despite multiple large-scale searches, not a single piece of physical evidence belonging to Lauria or Ashley was found. In 2018, one man was formally charged with the girls' killings based on witness statements describing what had happened inside a nearby house on the night of the crime. The case marked the first official acknowledgement from authorities that the girls were believed murdered shortly after being taken from the Freeman home. But even with the charges, the location of Lauria's remains remained unknown. Her parents continued to push forward, determined not to let the case fade into memory. 2 decades after the fire, the disappearance of Lauria Bible still stood as one of Oklahoma's most painful, unsolved cases. Lauria's family, who never stopped searching, held on to the hope that the truth would someday surface. They continued to walk the land, revisit old leads, and push for answers wherever they could be found. Each year brought them back to the same question. Where was Lauria when the flames rose over the Freeman home? And what happened to her after she was taken into the darkness beyond the road? Despite the arrests, the theories, and the countless investigations, the most important answer remained missing. Lauria Bible had never been found. Her story continued through her family's dedication, through the searches that never completely stopped, and through the ongoing fight to uncover what happened during those final hours of 1999. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.